The different transformation and its acquisition of work, which is the process for the different relentless structural and different constitutionalization and its amendment and its reformations for the fundamental, which is actually transformation of different guidance and its responsibility, like the one nation one election, which is comprehensive for the different governance approach and its political strategy behind the one election, which is administrative reformation and it's a foundation for the different prosperous for their ideologically. It is the constitutional reformations and its process for their different way of the resilience structural in India and its governance reformations, which is the commanding of different forms of the utilization of different governance schemes and its policy, which is recommendation and its foundation. The procedures for the defining a structural, which is relentless structural for their processing, the defining and its institutionalization for the different regardless of the procedures, and the efficiency for their gracefully responsibility, which is a different constitutionalization. It is the transformation and its growth and its orientation for their neutral efficiency, which is the challenges for their influential part of the approach and defining a structural. It is the guidance for their different recommendation and its procedures for their deficiency and transformation, the different working and its phase for their different relentless structural. It is the procedures for their defining a structural and its role and its regulatory for their transformation, which is gracefully responsibility and its simultaneous structural preconception for their hidden and the transformation for the ideologically, which is a different process. But long story short, it is happening throughout the process for the different governance levels and the process for the saving of different expenditure through the election to expenditure through different political parties, and it is harnessing the GDP of Indian economy, and it is also the burden of the government. But it will be finding for the one nation one election, which is crucial for the approach for the governance policy and its reformation, the transformation execution in its a functional association, which is defining and its a partially approach and transparency which is occurs, but the transformations and its a role in its efficiency, which is gestures for their transformative resilience structural, the processing for the defining and its institutionalization and its process for the different recommendation of the transformation. It is challenges for their efficiency and dynamic processing structural for the different regardless of the procedure, which is the efficiency and dynamic institutionalization. Growth in its orientation for their neutral efficiency, challenges for their effective and transformation for their neutralization and its influential part of the approach. How to growth and its orientation, which have different sensitive approach and its influential structural for their defining structural, the processing and its gracefully responsibility, which is the hidden of the transformation, and the supplementary for their ideologically, which is the community and its a procedure for the different circulations of work, and it's basically for the government execution working and its principles, the fundamental approach about the growth efficiency and its a proper transparency emerging in different levels of the governance procedures. It is the growth and its orientation for their neutral efficiency working and its capacity for their requirement, the challenges for their efficiency and dynamic procedures for their influential structural and its growth and its requirement for their different phenomena, the structural and its different recommendation of the procedures and its efficiency for their transformation. How to different relentless structural and its growth and its orientation for their defining association and its structural, the procedures and its guidance for their different referendums and its ecologically prosperity, which is the institutionalization and its growing for their influential part of the approach, and different commercialization and its process for their relentless structure. It is the hidden of their transformation and its growing for their influential part of the approach, and different commercialization of the processing as structural and its role and its regulatory for their efficiency and transformations for their neutralization efficiency and its dynamic procedures, which have the commercialization and its procedures for the administrative reformation, the administrative and its different data, which is integrations and it's part of the approach, which is the perceptions about the structural and its perception about the growing and its influential structure. How to define growing and its part of the approach, which is the relentless structural and its growth and its orientation for the different articles, reformations, execution and its amendments, like the article 82, 356, and the procedures which is happening, which is the associated in its functioning for their different neutralization and its growing for their influential structure. The comprehensive advantage and its resources about the growth and its orientation for their neutralization and how to transforming the structural processing and its a gradually reformation of the socialization and its cooperative advantage. The beginning and its institutional and structural processing and its advantage for their cooperating and its surveillance for their supplementary ideologically, which have the different institutional and structural and its growth for their orientation for their neutral efficiency. It is the efficiency and dynamic institutionalization for a process for they are different regardless of the processing structural, which is the different happening and its institutional structural. The growing for their influential structural for their defining structural. The process of the recommendations and its process for their defining and its institutionalization. How to different growing and its influential part of the approach and different referendums and its ecologically, which is the defining structural processing, which is happening in different instructions and its minds for their possibility and its structural for their regardless of the procedures which is happening for the defining a structure. It is the commercializations, and it's happening for the defining a structural and it's a processing for their different recommendation and it's supplementary for their ideologically, which is happening in different role in its regulatory efficiency in the procedures for the procedures and it's a recommendation for their delighted structural, and it is the processing for their defining and it's associated for their neutral efficiency, which is the commercialization and its procedures for their different regardless and it's happening in the different role in its regulatory for their transformation. How to defining a structural and its procedure for their deficiency and transformation for the different recommendation processing and its institutionalization for their different role in its regulatory, which is the condition about the fundamental and its associated for the different growth in its orientation for their neutral efficiency. It is the challenges and its scope and the hidden of their transformation. How to neutralize and its growing for their influential structural and its role and its regulatory for their transformation. How to growth and its orientation for their neutral efficiency. How to transformations and its growth for their neutralization and its processing for their structural and its associated for their integration and its part of the approach. It is the associated and its neutral efficiency, the guidance and its procedure for their requirement and its phenomena of the structure synthetic part of the approach and different commercialization and its processing for their neutral efficiency, the process for their different regardless and its process for their commanding process and the institutional structural and its process for their defining association and its neutralization, comprehensive advantage, social evolutions and its process, the different personality and how do they negotiate cooperates and its consolidated structural resilience part of the approach, the efficiency, functional association, communication, and its processing for their institutionalization. How to different transformation, navigation, and systematic part of the approach, and its influential structural, the growing and its influential structural, and its requirement for their dynamic institutional structure, which is different functioning and its associated for their neutral efficiency, challenges for their effective for their neutralization, the growth and its orientation for their neutral efficiency and challenges for their effective part of the approach and its growing for their institutional structure. It is the commercialization and its process for their defining a structural, which is the different functioning and its association and its neutralization and its processing for their different beginning of the society, which have inclusive advantage, social evolutions and its process for their different capacity and its requirement for their phase efficiency, the defining and its association for their neutralization and its growth for their orientation for their different occupancy of the supply chains, which is the associations and its neutralization for their processing. How to different transformation, growth orientation and its neutral efficiency, which is dynamic and its processing for their structural and resources about different procedure for their efficiency and transformation. The reluctance and its part of the approach and its growth efficiency for their challenges and its escape and its efficiency for their transformation. How to neutral efficiency, growth and its compartmentalization for their process, which is the eventually and its condition about their resources and its efficiency for their procedures and its working condition for their neutral efficiency, which is the requirement and its a phenomena of the structural and its growth efficiency for their neutralization in its processing and its structural for their different beginning of the society, which have inclusive advantage resources about the different functional and its associations for their neutralization in its growing for their influential structural and its resources about different functional and its associated for their neutralization and its growing for the different reconsiderations and its approach about the efficiency execution and its working condition and its functional for their association for their neutralization. How to different dynamic institutional structural process for the different commanding process and the association for their neutral and neutral efficiency, which is the influential and structural for their resource and its influential part of the approach. The different growth and its orientation for their neutralization and its influential and structural, the growth and its different reconsideration of the procedures and its influential structural different procedures and defining for the different role in its regulatory for their transformation and its inclusivity for their challenges and its working capacity for their neutral efficiency, which is the neutralization and its processing for their structural and its growth for their different requirement and its phenomena of the structural and its resource efficiency which is happening. इतना तो आदमी बोल सकता है, बट मुझे लगता है कि मैं इसमें बहुत ही डेटा इंक्लूड कर सकता हूँ और भी बहुत सारे एस्थेटिक को यूज कर सकता हूँ। लेकिन कोई बात नहीं, अब तो सिर्फ बोलना ही ना सीख रहा हूँ, उसके बाद तो सिर्फ धीरे धीरे चीज़ों को और ज़्यादा क्लैरिफाई करना शुरू करूँगा। कोई बात नहीं, देखते हैं अब कहाँ तक और ज़्यादा इम्प्रूव हुआ है। ओके।